How are you, sir?
Yes, great, great. Yeah, we wanted to speak a few words. Just
I now call to order the Thursday, June 27th, 2019 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Item 2, public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address the Planning and Zoning Commission with regard to the items on the agenda other than the public hearing? I do have one person who signed up, I think, to speak, and we'll hear you during the public hearing. But if there's anyone who has any comments about the other items on the agenda, now is the time that you should come forward. Anyone? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 3, the minutes. 3A, consideration of an action on the minutes of the June 11th, 2019 meeting. Okay. Commissioner Simeone made a motion to approve, seconded by Commissioner Landine. Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. You and that mouse. There you go. Love-hate relationship. Okay. We will move on to item 4, the public hearing. 4A, receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed rezoning of 5.80 acres from standard single-family residential R1 to planned development PD district, final development plan, Grants Lake, Tempo Section 1, townhome community. Doug?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. This evening we're going to talk about the Grants Lake Tempos project. Just for orientation here, we'll go ahead and show this is State Highway 6 and Grants Lake Boulevard. This is the water feature, Grants Lake itself. The property before you was platted back in 1982 and developed at that time. It's 5.80 acres, 80 residential lots in 13 total buildings. Once it was developed, it had been outside the city for a number of years at that time in the ETJ. The ETJ did not have any building permits or any type of plan review or approval as far as the city goes. It was brought into the city in 1991, fully developed as part of one of the mud districts in that area as part of a larger annexation. Fast forward to late last year, there was a fire at the building number 24, and we'll show some additional drawings, but this is up here in this location. It did, thankfully there was no loss of life, but did severely damage property at those units. And then as the city looked at that, bringing attention to codes and zoning for reconstruction at the site that was going to be needed, we looked closer at the zoning and saw that we had some incompatibility there, and this had evidently been some type of larger scale R1 zoning post-annexation. We looked at the R3 zoning, which is the standard townhome zone, but did not believe it was appropriate due to its row-style lots. Most of the townhome work that the Commission has seen over the last 15 to 20 years has been PD-oriented, and it has been a mixture of complex type like this, as well as some other styles. We did determine that definitely a rezoning was needed. and that likely it would need to be city initiated as part of that for essentially an as-built area. One of the things also looked at and talked with the property owner's contractor was the need for any new construction to be required to meet all current building and fire safety codes. And that will include, just for the record, that will include needing to sprinkle the new 8 units that are going to be constructed, as well as full firewalling, fire stops, those types of things. That automatically applies under the city's codes to new construction. So looking a little closer here, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the aerial, and again, just orient. Highway 6 at the very top here. I've focused in on the Tempos Section 1 townhome complex. I do want to point out up front here, and as we put in our report, there is a Grant Lakes Tempos Section 2, and as part of this, looking at the zoning surrounding this, pulling plats, looking at the development patterns, we are going to need to essentially, we believe, take that complex through ultimately a rezoning process as well. However, this represents the greatest need right now. This is also where we've been working with the property owner's consultant and their architect for a base map for this complex. And of course, they're working based on the funds that they've gotten for the damage and that. So we've been working with this. We are looking at the area comprehensively, and it's on our radar to essentially match up closer with how these communities were built. They're very, very similar to one another. So that is something we're going to be revisiting. Let's look a little closer. We can see there is ingress-egress points at three spots. You can see a lot of mature trees around the facility. This area here, 28-foot access drive. One of the things we did, and here as well, up into here and back, we did have the fire department look at the access, and of course this is how it was platted, this is how it was developed, and here's the amount of feet you have, what type of assessment, and they did say that this is the type of thing they would need, didn't need some sudden changes to that. From an access standpoint, those drive aisles and that do fit within the parameters. So I mentioned the zoning is city initiated. It replaces the incompatible existing zoning so that they can move forward with their site plan permits through the process with the city. It doesn't alter any existing residential development that's existing and fully there. We did review the covenants and restrictions for the property just to make sure that we understood a little bit about them and didn't want to deliberately put something in or accidentally put something in the zoning that would conflict exactly the opposite. And we did not find that to be the case. The recommendations that are in the report and attached in the ordinance are based on our analysis, again, taking a close look at the recorded plat and multiple field investigation visits to the site where I was able to essentially document the layout, the design, the development of the complex in total. The zoning category is recommended to closely match up with that existing development. And as we know, planned development can be used for a variety of unique situations, and we believe this is one of them that, again, is trying to match up with that existing development, provide a path forward for repair and reconstruction at the property, but also put some safeguards in place as well. One of the things we did look at, just very briefly, that may come to someone's mind was the question from the consultant as to the applicant's consultant as to whether the existing building could be rezoned in and of itself. And that's far too close to a spot type zoning. Not only not able to do that, but this was really built as a complex. It all builds on each other, and we want to handle this comprehensively. And that's how you would normally approve a PD for a townhome development anyway, as part of the whole. So we did need to include the full acres for it, and we're not able to just focus on the 8 lots with the existing building site. A little bit about the ordinance structure before you. Again, we worked with the owner's representative and their coordination with the management company as well for a base site plan and elevations. The buildings are very similar throughout the site in terms of their architectural features, their use of materials, predominantly masonry on first floors and siding on second. They're 2-story, but nothing exceeds 30 feet in height. So there's very, very specific, and they were able to look at that and prepare some elevations that we believe can be carried out through any other future reconstruction of townhomes. Legal description, just very straightforward. Exhibit B, you're used to applicants coming forward with text provisions in a final development plan, and then that development plan referring to specific exhibits. And I know for some that are newer onto the commission, we haven't gone through a lot of planned development districts since, I guess, wrapping up with the floor developments proposal late last year. But we've tried to follow that pattern. We believe it's a good pattern. We've included the plat as part of the exhibits. The layout we've enhanced, and I'm going to show you some specific ones that are, of course, also in your packet. Landscaping, pedestrian, and finally plant list based on what's really out at the site and what would be appropriate. This is just a quick look at the plat. Again, 1982 Grants Lake Tempos plat, and then I've really zoomed in here just to do a little navigating. Again, this is the private drive area. You have individual townhome lots that are under buildings. From what we can see, the Tempos Section 2, for whatever reason, has building numbers starting out before these, but this is the way this is laid out, so there's no numbers missing here. It basically starts with 12. The area along here and along the middle, and especially along the water and the northeast corner, quite a bit of common green space. Quite a lot of green space features for the complex. Taking you through, just real briefly, and we included some of this in the packet as well, looking at the Grants Lake, we can see the types of architecture, we can see the types of materials being used, internal walkways, pedestrian scale lighting is a nice feature throughout the property. We've put some safeguards in the PD that if a number of these things were ever removed, that there would need to be some replacement. We feel that that's a great feature that, again, takes it up to a higher level of quality, and a number of those things aren't required in the standard codes, but they have been a part of PDs usually. We looked closely at the covered parking as well, and one of the features we noticed that would be ideal to document is that the parking has these fascia bands along the side. That does make a big difference when you're looking at metal roofed canopy type, because it buffers that somewhat. It also can tie in better with the architecture of the property, and we believe that that was appropriate to document, and if there are any replacement or repair on that, that'd be part of the feature. I'm looking here toward the northeast by this brick wall out toward the lake. This area has some mid-height brick walls, about 4 feet. There are also some of these type of walls toward the front entrances in several places. We've documented that as well. And then between the residential immediately to the south, we have a screen fence, wood fence about 6 feet in height. This has got a cap along the top and baseboard or rot board as it's called along the bottom. Here we can see another example of some of the protected trees at the site. And then this is looking, again, coming around Grants Lake Boulevard. This is some of the landscaping there, and what we have here is the pool and amenity area, and this is some brick columned shade structures. I'm on the other side of it with this picture along the lake, looking up at the other portion of that, and we can see again the paths along the lake, pedestrian scale lighting. So this is the base map provided by the property owner's consultant team, and what staff did was take this and add a number of pieces of information to it in terms of labeling the common open space areas, looking at where the covered parking was to document it, as well as just the parking in general, looking at where were the refuse areas, which are all along the back here, and just providing an overall focus, the space map. And we also took this and did some enhancements to create the pedestrian plan and the landscaping plan. One of the things that we did, not that we were planning on having the applicant rebuild a bunch of existing parking, but we wanted to understand how did this parking ratio that they had documented as part of their platting relate to the current codes. And they used a different methodology. Of course, again, was not a city methodology at the time because that was not required. But they based it on a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom. As the commission is probably familiar, ours has a guest parking element, 1 space for every 5 units, as well as a specific 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom. We don't get into the above 2. But we found when we ran the numbers, even though the city uses a different methodology, we did find that it came out exactly the same, which was surprising but good to see. And that was something we wanted to understand as we were looking at the complex, trying to investigate that. I'm going to cover the elevations now. Essentially, we have a combination of brick masonry callouts as well as siding for it. The applicant is proposing to use hardy plank type siding, typical when we have siding on elements now. The overall buildings, as we said, have a number of features. They are very common in terms of their roof features, the projections, the types of areas out with the patios as well. Maximum height, 30 feet. This is a side view of those, and again, we were able to work with the consultant's team and provided these drawings with the call-outs. This is our work on the landscape layout based on field investigation. And so going very quickly here, the clouded type green are protected trees. These are trees that we determined on site were at least 8-inch caliper or more, and under the code those are protected hardwoods, and we have tree replacement requirements that are in the code for that. So we documented that. We also have some other landscaping. There's quite a bit of landscaping on the site that we've documented. We documented the brick wall areas that I had shown a photo of, and then along the back, the screening fence. And we believe these are all features that if in the future any reconstruction or repair, these should be taken into consideration. One of the strongest points for the site is really the amount of mature trees for it. And it's, of course, been the result of in many cases, at least 37 years. So we put some custom tree replacement that if a protected tree has to be removed, that there be not less than a 4-inch caliper. That's different than the development code, which is a minimum of 2.5-inch for standard tree replacement. However, we also customized with the other trees, which there are numerous red oak trees in this area. There are several magnolias on the site, and there are also a number of decent-sized crepe myrtles as well. Pedestrian layout, again, staff has documented here the public sidewalk at the right-of-way along Grants Lake Boulevard. And then we've documented existing, essentially the path interior sidewalks that connect where everything from along the water side to the interior and being able to essentially get around the site. There are several connections to the public sidewalk, and we thought those were important as well. I didn't include every single stub sidewalk to units. Those are out there. That's essentially understood that they do have the little stub part, but these are the main common area sidewalks. This is our attempt to draw those. There's some curvilinear areas in nature, but again, we're just trying to document those. None of them are less than 4 feet in width, and provides a guide for any future reconstruction. Finally, we've got a plant list. I know the Commission is very familiar with the plant lists and PDs. Again, these are based on what did we determine we found at the site, things that would be appropriate for replacement that are very similar. And this includes shade trees, small and ornamental trees, as well as shrubs. Very basic list, just essentially trying to capture those things that are in character with the development. One of the things we looked at was the comprehensive plan, and always look at the goals and objectives there, as well as the future land use plan map. And of course, there's been more enhancement in 2018 in terms of categories. This area here documents a number of the different products that are around in more of a mixed density type residential product, which is exactly true. We believe that the proposal is very much in alignment with that in terms of the existing development there. For the public hearing, we notified property owners within the Grants Lake Section 1. So we have the 8 individual lots that are related to Building 24 and the individual property owners that live within the 5.8 acres. We put together a specific letter for that. We also then put a separate letter with information if you're an adjacent property owner outside that complex. HOA notification, our newspaper, those standard things from a legal standpoint. Courtesy notification sign as well. We've had up to this point, we have not had any correspondence submitted, but we have had from property owners, but we've had 5 phone calls at the staff level since the public hearing posting, inquiring about the rezoning, wanting to fully understand, no opposition documented. Earlier in the year prior to the posting of the hearing, we also had some communication in terms of, I think at least 2 individuals calling about kind of the general situation. Just looking a little bit, we're not asking you to vote tonight. We are trying to move fairly quickly. It's taken us some time to get to where we are today since staff is essentially putting a lot of this together. But we do believe it's designed to match up with the existing development with the proper regulations for zoning. We are trying to be in character with that existing development in the area with the planned development, and believe that it's supported by our comprehensive plan. That being said, the next step will be to hold your public hearing, followed by discussion and any additional direction from the Commission. We anticipate consideration and action at a subsequent meeting, depending on how quickly that's able to be turned around. It may be the July 9th meeting. That's our hope, if possible. And we are also working and coordinating any actual building permit review during the zoning time. So once the zoning is officially authorized by council, things will be ready to move forward with as a courtesy on that. So that's the information we have. We'll be happy to answer any additional questions after the hearing. The property owner's building contractor consultant is here as well, and I know there are a number of interested folks that that live at the complex.
Okay, thank you, Doug. I will now open the public hearing. I have one person who's signed up to speak, but anybody who would like to speak is welcome to come forward and speak. We'll start with Mr. Williamson. Mr. Sun, if you would start with your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure. My name is Willie Sun, and I live in 2522 Stevens Green, okay, in Sugar Land. First of all, I thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. And we 8 units in Grants Lake. We call home. It's beautiful, quiet places, and we enjoy living there. All of a sudden, last November, the devastating fire just destroyed everything. So 8 units are no longer there. So some of us have stayed hotel for several months. We have moved to different locations. It's pretty tough for each one of us. And then we appreciate, we have a good homeowner association and a contractor insurance company. We work together early this year. We finalized pretty much a lot of things and ready to move forward for the new building for us. At that time, I think the contractor said, hey, we can move in November. But all of a sudden, we found out the zoning is not correct. It was wrong. And it is really devastating news for us. As we can see here, in 1982, this 5.8 acres was platted as a specialized townhome complex at that time. But we didn't know what happened. Last year, November, it was zone R3. So we have to go through all the procedures. So that means we want to go back home for another 6 or 8 months later. And each month we were away, we spent a lot of money. We've been losing money. And so we come here. I first appreciate Doug, the city planner, who's very honest, very prompt to respond to all the questions we had before, and really appreciate that. And he, just like he mentioned, that he did a beautiful presentation here. So everything looks good to us. So we appreciate that. Want you, all the commissioner, please consider us, our situation, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Okay. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and we will move on to a review and discussion on the proposed rezoning of 5.80 acres from standard single-family residential R1 to planned development PD district final development plan, Grants Lake Tempos Section 1 Townhome Community. Does anyone have any questions for Doug or the architect that's working with the group?
A couple of questions for my education.
Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Doug, are the individual units, are they individually owned, or is there a property owner that owns and they lease the townhomes from the property owner?
The lots are fee simple in terms of that. As to whether anyone had been subleasing out as to whether the owners had been leasing out particular units, I couldn't say. But the way that this is designed is it's not a condo type. It's literally fee simple, where the entire unit plus the land under it is owned by individual property owners, and then the surrounding area is common ownership. Through the covenants and restrictions, and then they have a management company and HOA.
The next question is, with this PD, this would apply to any future development that wanted to be done on the site. Is that correct?
That's correct. This would essentially be, first of all, focus. It will allow the project to move forward to replace the buildings. And as we said, any new construction is going to have to meet all the most current building codes and fire codes. But it'll also allow a roadmap for reconstruction, whether there had been significant repairs or other reconstruction, as well as if there was a need for large-scale repairs of the drives or things in the common area. So again, that's essentially the roadmap, treating it comprehensively.
In this unit, 24 was the only one that was damaged?
That's correct. The 8 units within that overall building, that's
Okay.
correct. And that has now been demolished, and they're working on foundation leveling. There's some permits that have been approved by the city on that.
So any large-scale redesign or remodel in any of the other units in the complex would be required to meet current code?
That's correct, yes.
And that would include sprinklers and other elements as well?
That's correct. Everything that is current in the 2015, the existing International Building Code's 2015 version. That's
Okay.
what the city's adopted. One of the side notes, too, as far as that goes, is if for some reason, let's say that the property, that there was a significant total redesign of the property where some buildings were eventually torn down and they wanted to build new buildings in different places, we would need to take that through for a PD amendment. What this does is, though, provides that framework so we're not starting from scratch as well. Otherwise, it's a roadmap for essentially repair and reconstruction with this type of design layout. But building codes, whole separate matter in terms of following those. And we did involve our permits and inspections department folks as well as fire marshal's office in looking at the complex as a whole when we're putting this together.
Thanks, Doug.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chairperson.
You're very welcome. You know what, let's go ahead and just go down and get everybody's questions or feedback or whatever, and go ahead, Suzanne.
Thank you. Doug, I have a question. I know we're trying to expedite the process because we have people that need to get back in their homes, and I appreciate that, and I'm sorry for your loss on that. But what keeps us from rezoning both sections at one time?
Well, one of the primary things is that we have some materials provided through the contractor that we were able to use as a base map for this. Also, the elevations here. We don't have any materials except the recorded plat for Section 2. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands, one of the things we asked early on with the contractor was, did they have any building plans from the original building? And they did not, and were not able to obtain any. Of course, the city does not, because there weren't any submittals. So, and the county doesn't require that type of thing, especially in the 80s. So there's not other than the plat, there are no other materials. And again, we've already, to put this together for you, we have literally put most of this together at the staff level, which is not typical. So that's, if we were to try to do that, we could be looking at easily another 6 or 7 months, and it's just not, that's not something we're going to recommend to y'all.
Of course. Thank you.
But that's kind of the behind the scenes of what.
I had one other question. It wasn't about that as much. While we're looking at the sidewalks, is there handicapped accessibility in this included, or is there existing?
I can't speak too much in terms of any of the latest ADA. This would not, these type of things don't cause something to automatically be upgraded to that. If there's any damaged areas or things like that in the future, that has to meet the most current regulations.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Matt, do you have any questions or
Yeah,
comments?
I do. So and I may just have added one more, but the fact that now that the reconstruction, if you will have to meet all of the new building, fire, and safety codes, that there's nothing in there that would require ADA compliance?
If there's anything that's damaged and being replaced, right now that's fenced off around the outer perimeter of that where the building was. So if there is anything that needs to change as part of that essentially scope of work, that would be looked at, yes.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple other questions. I want to be clear. I fundamentally, I think this looks fine, and certainly would like to get the process moving as quickly as possible and get people back into their homes, and I think we should not lose sight of the loss and inconvenience that's been worked on these folks. So I do have a couple process questions, but I want to make clear it's not really, I don't really have an issue per se with any of this. I am curious about how it happened. So I understand that this was not city, it was not within the city at the time, it was in the ETJ. And what happened? When it got annexed, it got zoned as R1 at that time as part of a larger rezoning that took place?
When property is annexed into the city, an interim R1 gets applied. In fact, we've been working with y'all with certain parts of Greatwood and New Territory where we take it and we go ahead and customize out. We've not been able to fully recreate, neither Lisa or myself, in looking through records of that, fully recreate, how this was there. I know with some of the large-scale First Colony mud annexations, there's just no telling, but what we know is that the city would not have had a zone ready-made for this in 1982 or today in 2019. So it may have been, this is speculation a little bit, but it may have been that the staff looked at that and said, we're going to have to do something custom, and we're not able to revisit that for whatever reason. It may have not been fully realized. We're not sure. We haven't been able to fully recreate that. What we do know is, hey, we've got some things in this area that we want to match up a lot closer, and this is certainly the primary right now.
Okay, and then with respect, there were comments in the staff notes about that this is consistent with the land use plan in Chapter 6, and what I understood that to mean is that in Chapter 6 of the land use plan, there's a provision that says these types of medium density areas can ordinarily be handled through a PD process. Do I have that right? Right.
Essentially looking at development, and again, one of the things I want to go ahead and put out on the record, sometimes there's a feeling if something is older in terms of a design that it's probably not as good. Building codes and those things are things that evolve, but this has quite a few features that we would find totally appropriate in a townhome PD. So I think that's important to look at, especially the amount of common open space, the amount of pedestrian connectivity, landscaping, a lot of those things, because those are definitely things in a design that if someone brought a brand new development forward, we would be looking for. So while there's been some time there in terms of the complex, the style of development and that medium density type is really, the PD process is the appropriate way to look at how do you mix lots, how do you design those things that our standard zone R3 was not really designed for at all. It's kind of a more row townhome type thing with really not these in mind at all.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I follow up on that just to say on process?
Go right ahead.
So to follow on some of Matt's questions, is this, are there other areas in the city that we think fall in this same category? I'm keeping in mind the toll that has been taken on the folks.
I'm going to stop you right there and ask council, is that okay to ask about other areas?
This actually should be about this.
Okay,
Right.
Fair enough.
For now.
Thanks. Sorry about that. So let me.
I'll take a shot at that. I mean, so
Earlier in his comments.
the staff notes for this proposal indicate that there is additional part
Right.
of this area of the, I don't want to use the wrong terminology. Yeah, there's across the street. So we know it's called out in here that there's at least one other area that I would say is currently incorrectly zoned that at some point in the future will have to go through the PD process. Okay, so I think a fair question on that would be, at this time, have you identified other similar areas based on this exercise that you've performed in this case?
Thank you, Counselor.
Again,
I don't think they've done that, so.
I really couldn't speak too much to it, but, right.
That
Right.
there are, so he
Right.
has identified it.
Right.
But that's not either here and there about this one tonight.
I'm just asking in the process that you've gone through to make this presentation tonight, other than the one other area that you've identified as potentially calling for rezoning in the future, have you identified any others?
And right now, I can't say that we know of specific others, and that doesn't mean they're not out there.
okay. Thank you. Dan? do
Cannot
you have-
confirm or deny. Yeah, Doug, thank you for that presentation. My primary interest is what is it as a commission we can do to help expedite, help staff expedite and get these people back home. Secondly, I just wanted to clarify what you package and how we package and construct the PD will include finishes and all these matters as is common in a commercial PD, right? There'll be so many, this type of roof, this type of siding, is that
In
generally?
general, right, as we would in a townhome
Okay,
PD,
townhome,
right, a
I'm
little
sorry.
different than the, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, we've tried to follow that structure, and we've essentially, again, used the existing
Right.
complex as a roadmap.
Exactly.
Yes, sir,
Such
that's
that
exactly right.
if this tragedy would ever hit again, or if it's just time to replace the siding in the community.
Right. We've got more
They
than
have to
five.
do this.
Right.
They have to go in this direction, that sort of thing. So you're going to create that continuity. And again, if there's anything we can do to expedite, I think I can easily speak for the commission that we want to do that. That's all I have.
I just want to clarify, I mean, this is not a commercial development, this is a residential, and these are individually owned. They own the property personally that their home is built on, and then the other common areas are commonly owned, but the city would not, through our PD or whatever, we're not going to enforce anything. It would be the homeowners association, correct? I mean, when new siding needs to go up or whatever, that is not a city.
Right, beyond our general property maintenance code that requires folks to keep their properties up in the city, that's correct, right. This is, but it does put that structure in there if there's a need for repairs or significant reconstruction.
Well, as a follow-up to that point, this is a PD. It will have a city council ordinance.
Right.
These exhibits that are
Right.
here are going to be a part of that. And so from that standpoint, that's, when I get around, that's where, I want to make
Right.
sure that these exhibits, because, it's being specific.
Right.
And so it is a PD. And
That's
it-
correct,
And we're treating it as that, just because we're doing it after the fact. What we're doing is correcting some problems.
And codifying the development.
And
Yes, sir.
not changing what's there, but saying, going forward, this is definitely what it's going to be.
Right.
I mean, so I'll shut up till I get around to that.
Okay, okay. I just have a question about, I remember when I served on the Zoning Board of Adjustment, there was an issue, and I want to say it was with a home in Venetian Estates that had burned down, that would not be allowed to rebuild because of current ordinances, so they allowed them to, they couldn't even rebuild the same house they had, basically. And so there was a new rule that I guess the city put in that would allow people in those kind of situations to be able to go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, so that they could hopefully be allowed to build their same home. And it's different from a lot of other variances that would traditionally be allowed as far as hardships on the property and whatever. I didn't know if that was still something.
I can speak to that
Okay.
a little bit. The overall variance process that's documented in the code really hasn't changed. However, that process is available for property owners. There's also a separate special exception process for some pre-annexation setbacks, but it
Right.
would not cover the amount of things that would need to be looked at for this. And we did explore the idea, at the very beginning, we looked at, the R3 zoning. We also looked at the possibility of some variances. Two things came about with that. Number one, we cannot guarantee that the board would grant them because the criteria, everything from specific hardship to those other things, and it's not a financial one under the way that the law works. But we also didn't think that applying for a whole multiple series of variances was really going to get at the heart of this. So the amount of that would be before the board would be highly unusual. And again, we would still fundamentally have this development that really needs to be brought in comprehensively. So we did explore at the very beginning.
Right, right. And the reason I bring it up isn't because I feel like that's a more appropriate route to take, just that I think that doing something like this is in keeping with kind of the spirit of that special exception process. Obviously, the zoning needed to be corrected on this property anyway. So, and like you say, all of the different homeowners that would have to go through and the whole process, I don't think that would be appropriate. I'm just feeling like it's in keeping with the spirit of that special exception to do this through the PD. And I feel very good about it because of the requirement that full adherence on all the current building and safety codes is a requirement, so that hopefully whatever started this fire, the homeowners would be protected against that in the future. So I support this completely. I like the elements that staff has included, like including the elements on the carport things, where the covered parking where people are parking, and just some of those, as was mentioned, codifying that and making it part of the PD and documenting it. So I fully support it, and I'm ready to move ahead whenever you're ready to bring it back. Carl? Your turn.
Doug, clarification for me. I understand these 8 units, because they're all destroyed. And just use an example, the firewall and the sprinkler, the whole building got to be replaced, so that would be a requirement. This wasn't one of my original questions, but you brought it, just thought about it. And if there was 1 unit out of 8 that wanted to do major interior renovation, I don't know, is a building permit required for that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and if so, then if that's required, are you going to require at that point, since we're putting this, say under the current code, how does 1 unit build firewalls and sprinkle without, you follow my, I don't know exactly, you know what I'm saying? How do you get that done? Think about it. Because you got common walls, and to do a firewall, and I'm not a contractor, but it's both sides.
Right.
As I understand it.
So Carl, you're talking about in a block of
8,
townhomes
they're all basically
that,
8
not
units.
this particularly, but maybe one that hasn't been damaged.
Well,
and
this
now
one, I'm
I
talking this
wanna
one
renovate.
particular, because this is the PD that we're working on.
Right.
The rest of them don't, as far as I know, they got if they have a PD, it's already in place.
No, but I'm talking about other units.
Other units here, in other words, there's 6 units, whatever number of units they are. Use the 8 because that looks like the majority of them. This one is easy. I hate it because of the situation, but it's the whole 8 units that they're rebuilding. So that's easy to include that in the reconstruction.
Right.
But if I owned one of these and I wanted to do a major renovation inside of my townhouse, at that point, am I going to be required to put firewalls and sprinkler on my unit, and the 2 guys on the other side of me don't, theirs is not.
Right.
And so that's, I don't know, I just thought of that when you was.
Right.
How's that going to be, how are you going to handle that?
So you're talking about one of the buildings that hasn't been damaged?
It hadn't been
And now-
damaged.
and now
Somebody
it
just,
won't-
they
Okay, I
need
see
to
what
do
you're
it, but they
saying.
got to go get a permit.
Right.
And now, under this PD, the new codes come into being.
The PD does not actually cause the new codes to come in. They're already there now.
Well, but I mean.
Yes, sir. So they would have to deal with that regardless, even if we had this. So
If you didn't have the PD.
Right, yes, sir. They'd have to the fire marshal and the building official staff would have to look at that. I know that the code books also have what they call some addendums as well as different methods. So they are going to ultimately look at the amount of
Well, I guess-
rehab or rework, and that'd be a real thing.
I
yes,
guess
sir.
what I'm saying maybe then is that somewhere in this PD, that needs to be a part of the PD that says if you're going to do,
We wouldn't be able to
Huh?
put, we would not be able to put
What?
those in the PD about how you would. Right.
you've said it, that if others happen, you get every house there, if this comes again, they're going to have to do this.
Right.
Well, but why
But the-
would you have to include it in the PD? It's a requirement anyway. It's a requirement
I
anyway.
think-
They apply to all the buildings in the city now. Right.
It's going to be governed by the fire codes and building
Right.
regulations.
I just think you take all the ifs about it out.
I follow you, though.
I mean, that's all
understand what
I'm not, but anyhow, that just came up in my,
I would think most people probably wouldn't be upset about that either after seeing what happened to their neighbors' units.
well, but, if you're going to do, if you're going to tell them how they got to do, you might as well tell them how they're going to do.
Carl, can I follow up on that with just a clarification on that point? So I want to make sure I understand what you just said, because in the staff report, it says, one of the important items to note, however, is that any new construction or reconstruction of residential units within the boundary of this PD will be required to meet all current City of Sugar Land building and fire safety codes, which are independent of zoning.
That's
Are you
correct.
saying that?
That applies now.
That would happen anyway?
That applies now.
Even if it wasn't a PD?
Okay, so you've already said that in here. That's all
We just mentioned it in the staff report, but we cannot
that's not part
put
of
that specifically in the ordinance because we already have an ordinance for the entire city.
But does the ordinance of the PD say that, I think it should say what Matt just said. I thought that was what he was reading from, was what was going to be in the ordinance.
What I'm hearing, though, is that this is just, the statement is not because we're doing a PD, now everything within the PD will have to be compliant. You're just pointing out that
I'm pointing it out for
regardless,
information.
that
Yes,
it's
that's
already the
right.
case
Right.
that any new reconstruction or new construction would have to be code compliant.
And whenever council adopts, and they do it every few years with the latest electrical, fire, building, property maintenance, all of those things, code enforcement, Nicole deals with that too. But when they adopt that ordinance, it applies to the entire city for any new construction. So yes, that's,
To your home or any home.
Where are you-
It's
wait a
not
minute,
just
wait a
in a.
minute, wait a minute, where are you reading? that
Exactly.
from?
The second page of the staff report.
Oh, so it's not in an exhibit that's going to be part of the PD?
No, because it's, as I'm understanding it, it's not part of the PD. Part of the PD is not a requirement that you must comply with the existing codes. The point is just being made by city staff that that's already the case regarding
Exactly.
any construction or reconstruction. That's what I'm
Exactly.
understanding. So
that-
tell me if I'm wrong.
That's
So-
correct.
So it's nowhere, you haven't referenced that anywhere in Exhibit A, B, or C, or any of these exhibits that become a part of the ordinance. Is that what you're saying?
that's
Doug?
correct because it's already an
It's
ordinance for the
already
city.
an
Yes,
ordinance,
sir.
and you can
That's
enforce
correct.
it when they come for a permit?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
Citywide, yeah.
So I'll let you worry about how you're going to handle that when it happens.
That's why we'll have a building official and a fire marshal looking at those.
I want to
things.
see that firewall be built between those two, anyhow. Where did I? Doug, this is an unusual plat.
I concur. Yes, I do.
In that
Yeah.
that it's platted, and you got individual pads, I'll call them, instead of lots, but you can call them whatever you want. And the individual that owns that townhouse owns the underline on that, okay? And so, because when this plat was done, it was done by Trendmaker, blah, 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 but on the plat, I don't see, for example, they've got private drive. Today, when we do private streets, or whatever you want to call it, we call them PAE, PUEs, okay? And this plat, I can only find one reference to any utility easement, and that's a 10-foot water line easement in some places, number one. Number two, where's the storm sewer? Is it, and whose storm sewer is it? Number three, where's the sanitary sewer? And whose sanitary sewer, is this, is the city own these sanitary lines? Do they own these water lines? And where's the meters? Because you got individual ownership.
Right,
I assume
right.
that there's a water meter for every townhouse. And I assume that's the city's water meter. And so whose property is it on?
Right,
Starters.
right.
I just.
Right. One of the things that staff looked at early on is, again, it looked like it was done as a lot more of a apartment-style complex. And if this came through a platting process now, you would have to delineate quite a bit more.
Well,
but we can't do it with this.
I know we made
Right.
a replat, but who owns and who's responsible? You said you looked at the deed restrictions.
Right.
Did you run a title report on this whole deal?
We haven't put a title report together for
My
for the
question,
zone.
because if this title to these what areas that I'm talking about, in my opinion, could still be in Trendmaker Homes, because that's who owned it at the time this plat was done. And unless there's some document, and there's no legal description that's on this plat that I could invade it by. So there's some issues here that we're solving. If you're going to solve the problems, guys, it's time, you got to tackle them all.
We won't be able to solve those through this process, though. That's just going to be the reality of that.
Remember, Carl, he said he was lucky to get this plat. Had the fire happen on the one across the street, you would have come up empty, correct?
We do have a plat for that, but again, these
recorded in Fort Bend County.
Right.
Well, you can find that.
Right.
But the other documents that he's referring
I'd follow everything you're saying, and we can provide a little bit more information with some additional research, but again, we won't be, one of the things we did call out in the PD was to clarify, and I did see it in the covenants and restrictions about access from an emergency standpoint through the private access, but one of the things we put in there was that those be maintained for access, but we will not be able to use that process to create new easements and do this. That's not ideal, but I need to be very upfront with the commission and everybody
I
about
would
that.
say to you that as a minimum, I would get a title report on this whole tract. And if Trendmaker still owns that underlying fee, minimally, you should get that transferred to the homeowners association.
That's something they will need to do. The city will not be able to do it. Any transfer, conveyance.
But whose water lines and sewer lines are out?
Right.
Who's maintaining the water line and the sanitary sewer line?
And that's what I'm telling you. We can research further, but that's not going to be able to change this document.
Okay, but I'm just saying to you, you got, I mean, I
Right.
assume that the city's obviously collecting the water and sewer bill
Right, right.
on each individual townhouse. Just, I'm just doing my job. Can't help it. Parking lot areas are required to be maintained to provide a minimum of 172 parking places. So who maintains it? The HOA? I don't know.
That's what the covenants and restrictions talk about, the common areas and that. But again, we're not going in and redoing that. You know, I understand where you're going with that, but we're not rewriting their covenants and restrictions.
No,
They will have to do that.
I'm not asking you to do
Right,
that. I'm just
yes,
saying,
right.
I think there's some issues that needs to be addressed that may be outside of this, that the city.
Process, right.
Particularly the utilities, okay? These exterior, it's a couple of places that I'm going to bring it up, but where the exterior elevations, you got architectural features. This is in the Exhibit B, F1. It's part of the restriction. To Exhibit D2 and Exhibit D3, exterior elevations for overall building architecture style, existing materials, blah, 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 blah. Where I'm headed with that is House Bill 2439. It is now law. September 1st. Huh? September 1st. Well, they're not going to be under construction permit by then anyhow, so.
I have a few comments on that we've talked about that with.
And so when you get over to the Exhibit D2 and D3, I guess, my question is, hardy siding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's pretty close to hardy plank. That's a named type.
A trade name,
You know, I mean, you got brick veneer, you don't say Acme brick, so I think you're okay there. But the hardy siding,
yeah.
I think,
Should it be cement siding?
well,
Or
there's
generic.
another, more.
Generic, yes, sir.
Okay.
Right.
And shingle roof. The plat says use of wood shingles within the project is strictly prohibited. So I don't know if shingle roof, you know, which kind of shingle roof? Not a brand name, but
Composite.
it implies, you know, I could put wood shingles on there. Shingle roof, it doesn't say. That's a shingle.
Right, I follow you.
You with me?
With the exception of the fire codes on that now, but yes,
Well, but
that's
I mean,
correct.
I'm
Right.
just following, you know, so you need to,
They had provided that, and we can probably have them change that to the cement fiberboard for the hardy and the, the composite material shingles.
Yeah.
And I think that will help generalize. Super quick, the comments, as Carl was mentioning.
Yeah.
the-
I didn't mean to interrupt you for that.
No, that's okay. The staff is currently assessing recent state law related to limiting what cities can do with building finishes. It's not related to building safety codes, but it's related to everything from masonry to other things. I don't want to get into too much on the record about that right now, but what we can say is that there are a few exceptions, some initial discussions with legal, especially with PDs, has a little bit different of a different element that we believe. However, that's still an ongoing thing. We're putting this forward because we believe it is the most like what's there, and that's what the applicant team has wanted to do and agreed to do, which that's an important part of the PDs versus the standard zoning. But I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of internal discussion, and then eventually discussion with the commission about building finishes in general based on what the state has now handed to cities on that. So
up until now, though, the HOA has enforced what finishes and whatever is allowed in here. Is that correct?
that'd be correct, right.
And so, I mean, really, it seems to me that would be precluded.
But in PDs, we have spelled out.
Right,
Brick,
right, but the
all that kind of
HOA
stuff.
will continue to enforce it. I
Well, but
believe.
I don't know, I don't know what the HOA says here. I mean, it doesn't have any brick or, I don't know what they said.
Right. What we're proposing
And I will
going.
say to you
right,
that my
right.
sources tell me that 2439, that PDs don't count. But deed restrictions is okay.
I think we're going to put our strongest foot forward, and if it's unable to be,
Well,
that'll be something to deal with for the future, but we definitely,
We're dealing with this now,
or-
and it's a part of it, and it's going to be a part
Right.
of it, so that's why I'm bringing
Yes,
it
sir.
up.
right.
Okay? You know, and speaking of the plat, in the dedicatory language, it says, we dedicate to public use as such the streets and easements shown thereon forever and do hereby waive any claim, blah, blah, blah. There's not a public street in this plat. So the only thing that's there is the private street. So is it, I mean, it's,
It's not ours, and we don't upkeep it, and we never have and will not.
well, I don't know. I would, you accepted the plat, I would question that, though, but that's, anyhow. Where's it? So we're not concerned about these water and sewer lines.
I don't have the ability through this process to do anything further with that, and that's nor can we re-litigate the plat through the process or anything. I'm interested in finding out some additional research on it, but I need to keep this focused on what's going on. And again, that's not necessarily unlike all kinds of older platted properties that are from the 80s or 70s, or there's no telling. But that doesn't mean I don't recognize exactly what you're saying.
Is it a fair statement to say that each one of these units has their own water meter?
I believe they do, but we would need to do a little more research on that specific question. I don't have that right up here with me.
On this, I don't know which exhibit you want to put it on, but looked at Exhibit D1.
D1, okay?
And you go, and headed where I'm going with this is, you've got Exhibit D2 and D3, which are fine exhibits, except you call them east elevation and west elevation, and north elevation and south elevation. But when you go back to Exhibit D1, and I'm assuming the north is toward Grants Lake, and the east is the lake, and south is the other way, and west is... All of these buildings don't face. They're different directions. So this exhibit doesn't match. You follow me?
Depending on which building you'd use it for, that's correct.
Well, but it doesn't, it just says that it's only east elevation and west elevation.
Right. We'll add some additional information under what the
You know what,
applicant
my
put
suggestion
in.
was to do a
Right.
chart by these numbered like 22, 21. Every one of them, you can make those comply with the exhibit. You with me?
I follow you. Right, right.
So I just want to, and how does these, what are they called? Refuge areas? Are these front end loader pickups, or what are these?
That's correct. These are where the existing dumpsters are at the site.
How does the truck get in there to get them right now? I mean, you got parking all around them, and you got two stacked on top of each other. I'm just.
I really can't speak to it beyond we identified them, and if they do reconstruction of paving in those areas, we're going to need to apply some screening at that time.
I would, on Exhibit D1, I would suggest you add the north, south, east, and west so that everybody knows where you start at when you get over to the other.
Right, I follow you. Right.
Are you suggesting elevations on all the buildings? Because the ones there's just showing are the building 24.
What we are proposing here
This
is that be
for the whole.
that be the roadmap for the rest, because
Yeah, but they're not all the same
Right.
size.
Really?
the majority of them are
They all look alike.
right.
Yeah, but they're all different sizes, east, west.
Right. What we're proposing, two things in mind. One, the state is obviously further limiting some of those things. From a finish standpoint, we're proposing that the style, the materials and those, and that's one reason we called out the language that we did,
Well-
because we're not going to have the applicant go create elevation for all these buildings. We're going to use that in a general way. Right.
Jay he brings up a valid point. Are these east, west, north, south elevations,
They're for building 24. That's correct.
okay, but correct me if I'm wrong, aren't all the other buildings the same?
They're fundamentally the same with some minor differences in layout.
So, but if we're making this applicable to the whole, all the rest of them,
Right.
then if we're going to use those exhibits, I mean, if we're going to have those elevations, then we're going to have to get the elevations for the other,
We're not recommending that at all.
well, but
We
then
are-
you can't, if it's different, how you enforce it, Doug,
That's why we put some language in this for that very thing, saying that it had features like that. We deliberately thought, we thought that through. I want to make sure the commission knows that we are trying to use the style of materials, the layout and fundamental.
No, and-
But, the Lake Point townhomes didn't have any elevations attached
No,
to them. So we don't want to be unfair in this
but that's
situation.
why I say, Jay,
Right.
I didn't
Right.
look at it that way. I looked at it as those are
Right.
the elevations for
Right.
So
all of these.
maybe the answer, as you suggested, is to add some language for clarification that it's the style that you're trying to capture, that it's not
Right,
the
right. We'd be happy
exact
to do that.
dimensions or
Then-
something. I
Right.
think that kind of accomplishes.
Whatever helps the roadmap,
Right,
we are more than happy to do, and I think we
Then
can do
if
that.
you want to do it that way, you need to say that these east, west, north, south, whatever elevations are only for number 24.
Only apply to that, yeah.
And
Because-
and then wordsmith it, that these elevations for all these other units
Or a guide for that, right.
or something.
Yes, sir.
Typical and
Yeah,
style.
because I hadn't focused on it that way. I focused on it that they were all the same.
I'm quite sure we can do that, and I think it'll be we'll have a good roadmap for that.
Okay? And that hardy siding goes on over to some other exhibits and other notes I showed you, or said something. By the way, your exhibit pedestrian layout, you said it doesn't show the stubs from each unit. Does the homeowner, if we're showing this, and I assume these are also we assume they're owned by the HOA or they're maintained by it.
Right, that's correct.
Then you at least need, if you don't show it, you need to say that the stubs are not, or something.
That's what I put in there, that they're not shown.
This retrofitting is tough, though.
It's challenging. That's why it's taken a little bit of time just to get this to you guys, so.
Jay, do you have anything?
I think all my questions, concerns have been raised.
Okay, Taylor?
What, if anything, procedurally is preventing us from voting on this tonight?
Because it's not been posted. We have to post it in
Despite
an
the fact that the
agenda.
public hearing's been held?
And we have to post it. It has to be posted in the
Consideration.
agenda. We don't
Right.
take
Say we would
action
not
if
take
it's not been posted in the agenda.
We also need, typically, you have a workshop for PDs, then you have a public hearing meeting, and you have essentially then a separate vote meeting. We've tried to compress this a little bit, but we needed to make sure we had heard everything, and we'll be the ones primarily making the edits and changes, so I wanted to make sure that the commission's comfortable to be able to move forward, and hopefully we can get it back to you at your next immediate meeting.
Okay. As far as feedback, what I heard was to use more generic terms for the hardy siding, to change shingle roof to composite shingles, and to add clarifying language to the elevations indicating that these specifically apply to Building 21, but that the character of the rest of the development should follow it, and to add a north arrow or compass to show.
That matches your elevations to
Right.
the overall deal.
Yeah,
too,
use
you
as a
know.
guide.
So-
post, right.
Is there anything else I missed as far as anybody's comments? Did that capture it? Does anyone else have any other concerns about this that staff should address before it comes forward for a vote?
Not a concern, but a kudos. It seems like a heavy lift, Doug, and seems like staff's done a very thorough job.
I
Thank
agree,
you.
Dan, yeah.
I've become very familiar with the complex.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a neat area there. The lake and everything around it.
Right, and thank you, Mr. Sun, for speaking, and to all the families who have been displaced. I think Suzanne said it, our hearts go out to you, and we hope you're home soon. Okay, we will move on. Then to item 5, fact findings and recommendation. 5A, consideration of an action on a recommendation of City of Sugar Land fiscal year 2020 to 2024 capital improvement program to the mayor and members of City Council. Keisha.
Good evening, Madam
Hello.
Chair, members of the commission. So tonight, we're going to review the draft list of the new projects for FY20, FY24. Per the city charter, section 501, section D, we're to receive the Planning and Zoning Commission input and recommendation to City Council and to the city manager for the 5-year CIP. Any of the existing projects carrying over are not on the list, as well as all FY19 projects, including our out years, are also not addressed on the list because they were already reviewed last year. The draft list, of course, will continue to be a draft until City Council approves the list. There's no reference to funding. It's also not fiscally constrained at this time. Sources of the projects came from City Council and city staff, as well as PER studies, master plans, assessments, development agreements, citizen satisfaction surveys, civic groups, as well as regulatory mandates. So with that being said, we are going to jump into airport. And before I get started, I do want to say that I have our subject matter experts in the back there waiting to answer any questions that you may have. But we're going to step through all of the divisions that have new projects and answer any questions that you have. The first one is airport. Their new projects is the terminal ramp expansion as well as the taxiway relocation phase 3. The terminal ramp expansion, that's the expansion of the existing terminal ramp by adding approximately 145,000 square foot of concrete pavement. A portion of it will be on the north side of the existing ramp, and then a portion of the southwest side of the existing ramp. The taxiway relocation phase 3, that is the final phase of the existing taxiway relocation project that has been ongoing. The project will relocate a portion of the airport perimeter access road and construct the remaining taxiway A pavement and runway entrances. And so this work will include grading, drainage, paving, lighting, signing, markings, gate, and fencing. And here is a map that represents the taxiway relocation phase 3, as well as the terminal ramp expansions, the north side and then the southwest side. Okay, and then those are all the new projects for airport. Moving on to drainage is the Brazos River Parkland acquisition, which is the purchase of 12.6 acres of land from the Protestant Episcopal Church to complete the city's ownership on the south side of River Park, as well as providing better regulated development along the Brazos River. The Riverbend Arch Siphon Pipe Rehab, that's at the intersection of Avenue E and Dulles. This is the pipe that was installed in the 1940s, so it's a very old pipe. It conveys stormwater from Sugar Creek. Of course, because it's so old, it's aging, it's in need of replacement, and so we're going to replace it to repair the structural integrity of the pipe.
What does the RBCC stand for?
I'm sorry?
In your justification description, you got RBCC?
Riverbend Country Club?
I couldn't find, okay.
Okay. And then moving into the Riverbend Country Club spillway, that's there's an existing bulkhead there that has an opening in there, which of course is allowing infiltration and concentration of the water to flow through the water system. And so this is also scouring out the bottom of the receiving area. So we're going to repair that notch in that area in the spillway. And then the last one is the Sugar Creek Golf Course drainage pipe system. There's a 54-inch concrete storm pipe that was installed in the late 1970s. So over the years, of course, we've been seeing sinkholes and openings up in that pipe. And so this is to restore the pipe's integrity so we can have it last for a few more years. Okay.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far?
I do.
Go ahead.
On the Riverbend Arch Siphon Pipe rehabilitation, that area is actually near and dear to me as my kids go to Dulles. And that is an extraordinarily dangerous pedestrian and bike path. Does this repair and rehab include adding about 100 feet of sidewalk that doesn't connect, making it very dangerous for children to go to school?
This particular project does not add sidewalk to it. However, Rob Valenzuela, who's the Director of Public Works, just heard your complaint, or your concern, I should say. And so that's something that we will be able to take a look at with our sidewalk rehabilitation to see what we can do in that area. But this particular project will not take care of that.
Yeah, there is no sidewalk there. It's just raw bridge. And anybody trying to cross that bridge where that spillway is basically takes their life in their hands and has to try to go up Dulles for about 100 feet against traffic either side of the street. There is no path there. And I'm kind of disappointed that with this rehab there, it doesn't include expanding that to include
Yeah,
the
this is
pedestrian path.
a drainage project, though, Andy? It's not.
Well,
Yeah,
the drainage
sidewalk
project
rehab.
covers the bridge too, doesn't it? Don't you have to go into that bridge to do
It
this?
will not cover the bridge.
So the bridge is going to stay exactly the way it is in that?
Right, the spillway itself will be underneath the bridge.
So the
Or
bridge
excuse
won't be
me.
impacted at all by widening the spillway?
We do not intend to improve the bridge. Unless.
I guess I was kind of surprised to hear that.
I'm going to let Rob expand on that.
Good evening, Robert Valenzuela, City of Sugar Land, Director of Public Works. So a couple things. I think we're getting two different projects stuck together, if you will.
Right.
We talked earlier about the Riverbend Country Club spillway. So that is an existing pond that's in the golf course. The city worked with the golf course years ago to develop that detention pond that handles storm flow from Sugar Creek, or part of Sugar Creek. There's an existing weir structure that's there today. The downstream side of it has some serious erosion happening due to the amount of storms we've been having. So that particular project will address that particular item. The other item that Keisha talked about was the arch pipe that goes, that takes water from that detention pond and conveys it to Oyster Creek. Currently, that pipe goes underneath the American Canal, which is the canal that you see when you cross Dulles at the bridge that you're talking about. The actual crossing of it happens at the head of that American Canal, which is probably, I don't know, 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet back off of Dulles, if you will. So you would, not unless you purposely went out there or chased one of your range balls from the golf country club, would you know that crossing is actually back there. I am aware of what you're talking about, that there is no sidewalk along Dulles in that area. Pedestrian bridge across the American Canal at that location would solve some of those issues that you're talking about. So I am aware of that.
But that's not addressed with this?
No.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
I do.
Go ahead, Jay.
Under drainage, you do have the Brazos River Park land acquisition project. I was just curious why that's not a parks project.
Well, the majority of it and the purpose of it really is so we can protect people from developing in that area where Brazos River and the potential of the Brazos River erosion would be. So we felt that this was more so of a drainage project than a park project.
But it's just the acquisition of the property?
It's just the acquisition of the property, yeah.
Is this down there by, back of Riverstone? Is that?
River Park, this is the River Park area.
I'm confused. So is it the Greatwood?
River Park, so the West River Park, so north of 59.
Oh, it's before,
excuse me.
okay, you go up
Yeah.
99.
Right.
Okay, I've got the roads mixed up.
And again, it's the remaining land that we need, one, to help with the access of the park,
Well,
but
it's not
mainly
highway
for
anyhow, so you won't
preventing
have
any
to-
development on that side. Okay?
Okay, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
On the Sugar Creek Golf Course drainage pipe rehabilitation, so the 1,200 feet of pipe that needs to be rehabilitated, is that pipe that was installed like fairly recently in connection with the earlier phases of the drainage project, or is that older?
The pipe that we plan on repairing was done in the 70s.
Okay.
So this is a 54-inch pipe. You want to add to that? So it's a 54-inch pipe. It was done in the 70s. It hasn't been touched since the 70s.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Moving on to
Everybody,
municipal. Okay. So the ITS rehabilitation, which is our high site communication improvements, this is, of course, our city has 10 high sites to provide wireless communication for our various traffic needs, our signals, our license plate recognitions, as well as our SCADA system that we use for our utilities. And so this is to upgrade our 10 high sites to improve our wireless connection to those various important needs that we have in the city. Okay. And then the last one is the senior center study. This is a study to address the growing needs of the existing T.E. Harmon Senior Center. We'll consider researching, and the research will include location opportunities as well as constraints, the building square footage requirements, the parking requirements, and operations. The project will focus on the capacity programming elements that we would need to enhance our growth in the area, as well as help improve what we are doing for our seniors. Okay, and that's it for municipal.
Anybody
No
have any
questions? I'll move
questions
on.
there? Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
So is that a late addition, or am I just missing that in the?
The senior center study?
Yeah.
It's an updated edition, yes, so you
Okay,
should
just
have
as long as-
received an updated.
Right.
I mean, we're recommending approvals, just making
Right.
sure that that's included in whatever is of record.
No, and we got, I think, an email from Michelle saying that,
Okay.
yeah, that,
On the
what,
download.
right, exactly, so.
Get the email that wasn't delivered here.
Okay,
Okay, y'all ready to move on?
and that's just the map.
I didn't even see that.
Parks has no new projects, so we're going to move on.
Yeah,
from
but
there.
Joe came anyway. Thank you.
I know. He's so dedicated, I know.
I'm telling you.
Madam Chairman?
Uh-huh.
Is that because all of the parks that were voted on and approved are in existing budgets, or?
That's correct. So any 19 projects that are ongoing, those are existing projects. You've already seen them before, and so we are not showing them tonight because they're existing.
Thank you.
Joe just want to make sure we couldn't talk about him.
Next, moving on to streets, is our major street rehab. This, of course, is our annual program that we do for street improvements. We have streets including Lexington, Pinecroft, Dulles, Lexington area, and then other associated areas that our pavement program recommended that we improve. Okay, and then our bridge rehab, which is again our annual program. This one specifically will be for the maintenance and repairs of the Sweetwater westbound bridge near Alcorn Bayou or Colony Meadows Elementary School. The maintenance will include partial depth repair of the concrete deck as well as reconstructing the sidewalk and then some backfilling of the approaches. Okay.
Keisha, I've got a
Yes, sir.
question. You're not showing the Jess Purtle Bridge rehab. Is that a fiscal year 19 project?
This Purtle Bridge is.
Or did
I
that
do
get
not know.
canceled?
Yeah, because it's a rehab project, I'm not sure if that's something that Public Works is just already incorporated into their bridge
Oh, you
rehab.
wanted it, that's why we didn't do it.
But it is not allocated for 20.
Yeah, Keisha's correct. The only bridge that we have allocated right now is the Sweetwater Bridge to repair for next
I
year.
thought I'd seen that on the list. I'm just curious because I'm the adjacent property owner.
No, gotcha.
Help me out, Rob, where's the Sweetwater Bridge? Is that the one
It's over there.
west of Austin Parkway?
No, this is over just, was it east, north of Greystone? Over by Colony Meadows. You have Colony Meadows, you have the daycare, and then you have the bridge, and then you have Clements on the other side.
Yeah, okay.
That area up there.
Oh, that bridge.
Yeah.
What's wrong with it?
There are some issues with it. TxDOT does a biannual inspection on them. This past inspection, TxDOT recommended some load restrictions be placed upon it due to some of the repairs that needed to be done on it. And so we took that as how we're getting to do it next year.
All right.
So, excuse me, Jess Purtle is not on the agenda anytime soon?
I'll have to go look and see if it is in the out years. My recollection is it's not, but I have slept since then. So.
But you might inspect it. It's showing some signs of wear.
Absolutely, and there again, we utilize the TxDOT inspections as far as
So how often does TxDOT inspect the bridges?
Every 2 years.
Every 3 years?
Two.
Okay. Every 2 years?
Every 2
Okay.
years.
Do they inspect all of the bridges, or is it rotating?
No, all
No,
of them.
okay.
Their retirement program.
Just another question, maybe it's in the previous budget as well. The hike and bike plan had the next 3 to 6 year phase plans to be put in the capital budget. I don't see any of those in here. I didn't know if that'd be in parks or in streets.
If you're referring to the 2013 Park Bonds Hike and Bike Trail program?
Yes, ma'am, we should be in the next phase of capital improvements to that.
Right, so we are having discussions with council regarding the 2013 park bond projects to complete those projects. It is the Brazos River Park Mid-Lake project as well as the Ditch H Trail and then the First Colony Hike and Bike Trail. Those were the 3 remaining projects from the 2013 parks bonds. If you recall, we needed to raise taxes in order to complete those projects, and so staff has brought those projects back to council to see if they are ready to increase the taxes for that. And Joe, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that's where we are with the Parks Bond projects. And so unfortunately, those projects will not be completed until such time that the taxes are raised in order to complete them. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we're good to move along.
Moving on, that is just the street map. The traffic evaluation and safety improvements, and of course, we've done a tremendous amount of work already around the city with intersection improvements, and this is just the continuation of those improvements. And so there are projects that we have highlighted and intersections that we have highlighted and designated for a study and or improvements to be done at those intersections, and that's what this project will cover. Okay, and that's a citywide project.
Any questions? Good. Okay.
Next is the wastewater treatment plant improvements. This is, of course, our annual program. This one in particular is for the North Wastewater Treatment Plant for the reuse purposes of that plant. And so this one will help us determine what improvements need to be done at that plant. The next item is the collection system rehab, which again is another annual program that we do for the city's wastewater collection system to see what parts need to be improved and repaired in our collection system.
Any questions on wastewater?
Okay. And of course, the collection system is citywide. The North Wastewater Treatment Plant is designated. There are no new water projects. Okay. So the surface water treatment plant yard pipe and aerial crossing recoating. This is the recoating of the above ground piping at the surface water treatment plant, as well as 3 aerial crossings along the surface water transmission line, of course, because they are exposed to the elements. The coating of those pipes come off from time to time, and this is just to recoat the pipes. Then our SCADA improvements, that's our annual program to maintain our SCADA system that, of course, speaks to our water and surface water, our surface water and groundwater plants. Again, going back to our ITS communications, high communications technology, this will help improve our SCADA system as well. And then the last item is the automated meter integration. This is a design and the implementation of the city's citywide automated meter infrastructure. This will help us systematically remote into our water consumptions. It will also help us reduce water loss and promote water conservation throughout the city. So this is a citywide improvement.
Any questions on surface water?
Okay. And with that being said, the staff would like to request that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend the FY20 to FY24 Capital Improvement Program new projects list to the city manager and the city council.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Stevens made a motion, seconded by Commissioner Canine. Is there any discussion? Okay, I think we can go ahead and vote
Do
then.
we typically not see dollar amounts for these? Is that typical?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question just for future reference. So, I mean, I appreciate this. This is a great presentation, by the way. Really, really well done. Thank you for addressing the questions. So we see a list of projects that are presented, and we're just asked to sign off on this list, right? So we don't have any visibility to anything that's not on the list.
We can make recommendations that things be considered for future budget years or as a priority, certainly. We can
Okay, and
do
I'm
that.
just curious, our scope is, I'm just trying to understand what we're being asked to approve. We're just being, because it's not clear to me.
Okay, we're being asked to recommend approval, and some of the things like just making sure that bridges stay.
No, I understand that. I get it. I get that we're being presented with a
Right,
list, and we're asked to be approved what's on the list.
Right.
I'm just saying, it's kind of a take it or leave it thing, right? We're not being asked to evaluate whether or not there are other projects that perhaps are equally as worthy as what's being proposed here.
Somewhere in the rules, there are certain things that we as a commission are required to recommend to council.
Okay.
Whether it be, I forget all of them, but, 3 or 4 different ones. And this is just one of those.
It's one of our roles
And I'll
in the
go take a
capital
look at that. I'm
improvement.
just curious as
Right,
to.
it's one of our roles is to do that, and what they do is they look, and based on budget and whatever, they have to prioritize and decide how they're going to fund it and what improvements have priority, and where it's part of our role as the P&Z to be a part of the process. But if there's something that you think needs attention, like Andy brought up, the sidewalk there next to Dulles Elementary. And so, as Keisha said, Rob heard that, and that's something that they will look into and consider.
Yeah, and to be clear, no, I don't have any
Right.
specifics.
Right,
Well, I didn't, but
right. So, anyway, if you haven't voted, go ahead and vote, and
But the theory is we're the planning commission, so we're supposed to know what's out in the future, so we look at the past.
okay. I think that passes, and we will move
Thank
on
you.
then to item 6, reports. 6A, Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Report for the City Council meetings held on June 18th and the 25th.
Those are both mine.
All right.
We'll start with the 18th. There were several really impressive recognitions that evening. First of all, Clements High School FFA, Texas FFA State Career Development Group, they won second place in floriculture. Now, I am by no means familiar with what that means. I will say, though, that some of the statistics that came up were impressive. 1,136 state schools competed, all the way from 1A to 6A. Every school, level playing field. Clements was second.
Wow.
So it was the highest thing they've ever ranked, highest place they've ever ranked in a state competition like that. Another recognition was Clark Peschel, the building official, recognizing his 34 years of service and his retirement, so there was some time spent there. And also Bridget Young, council member Bridget Young, it was her last council meeting, and they reminisced a little bit and thanked her. And then they swore in Nashad Kamali, the new council member for District 2, and he took her seat, and we moved on with the meeting. The only other items, there was the first reading of the extension of the plan development, let's see, authorize a 2-year extension for the Holy Cross Episcopal Church plan development, final development plan, which passed. These were under the consent agenda. And also the execution of a 2-year extension for the Imperial Highway 6 District Commercial Plan Development, District Final Development Plan. Both of those passed. The other thing that, talking about state mandates that affect us, people may know that the red light cameras were abolished by the state in the last legislature. So Chief Robbins made a brief presentation about those impacts, about how effective they were, and how now they'll need to hire people to replace that lost resource. So that was a little disconcerting that the state reached in and touched us, so to speak. Last night at the 25th meeting of the 25th, we got into the real tall grass of what Keisha just covered, the budgets and the whole job list, and why they whittled it down to these and so forth, and the tax implications and so forth. But so far as anything that really affects this commission, there were no planning and zoning commission items per se. So that's it.
Thank you, Dan. Great reports. I appreciate it. Item B, city staff report.
Just really quick, July 9th, your next meeting, Tuesday, 2 weeks from now, and we anticipate, again, we're going to address the comments we heard on the PD and hopefully bring that back. We may have another item. Right now, we're just looking at schedules. And in the meantime, we hope everybody has a safe 4th and a good time.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Andy's, and seconded by Jay. All in favor? Aye. We're now adjourned. Thank you.